gather round, we've got a story to share. Richie and John, they always care. Championing voices, fierce and strong. Tune in, turn up, you can't go wrong. Life and love, they're here to fight. It's Newsday Tuesday, let's take a stand. With Richie and John, let's shake the land. Voices of truth in every sound. In this podcast world, our hope is found.
The Mutual Broadcasting System presents Richie and John, the podcast that connects you with the people, events, headlines, and lifestyle interests of the global LGBTQ+ community. Here's Richie Roy and John McMullen.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Richie and John. It is Newsday Tuesday, and there is a lot of news to get to. I think that's probably going to be the case for the indeterminate future. Yeah. But I know that my wonderful co-host John McMullen just got back from a pretty interesting time in Las Vegas.
I did. I was at the National LGBTQ Task Force's Creating Change Conference that was held at the Rio in Las Vegas. And we had an interesting guest in town, especially considering the week that it was. It was a really great week, very important week, I think, to have the Creating Change Conference this year, because it was as a new administration took control of the White House and the federal government and our lives for the next 4 years. And I got to tell you, going into this, I think, as much trepidation and as much concern, as much anxiety as everybody else in the country was feeling with the inauguration happening this past week and the flurry of activity that happened following the inauguration. However, I think it was really a good week to get together as a group of activists and people who are leaders in this country and in our particular community's movement, because I felt really inspired to see so many people who were up for the fight of defending our rights and those of others who are in marginalized communities across America as we get into this period. So I think it was a really good time for us all to be together and be encouraging and hear about all the things that are being done to make sure that we continue to stay on course to fight for what's right in our country. So I have to say, overall, I got a very positive impression as a result of that. But of course, you know who had to come in and spoil things the last day that we were all there together for the full day, and that was the incoming presidential rapist, Donald Trump. He wanted to tout his bribery that he used with so many people who work in the service industry there in Las Vegas. He came to talk about his no taxation on tips. And of course, the people I saw in the audience around him in the news coverage from his press conference that day, they weren't the kind of people who looked to me like they were working in hospitality and the kind of people who work for tips. They appeared to me to be a little more of the garden variety of MAGA and of people who might be a little more privileged than a lot of the people who work in those service industry positions.
That doesn't surprise me. I mean, we saw, at the inauguration, we saw the incoming president surrounded by a coterie of kleptocrats and billionaires. And so, yeah, that doesn't surprise me that, using some tactic like the no tax on tips to try to lure the gullible into voting for someone who has policies that are going to make everyone worse.
Richie, it was probably the right move for him to do, because I don't think he had a overwhelming amount of support, but he had enough to bring the state of Nevada back to him in a critical state where it came to either flipping or losing the presidency.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we have a bunch of news stories today. Many of them are predictably about some of the decisions that have been made by the new administration in the first week. None of them should be surprising. They will be horrifying and shocking, but they shouldn't be surprising because they telegraphed exactly what they were going to do with Project 2025 and with all their public statements, and they are moving at full steam.
You know what? It dawned on me that maybe the reason that they were so out there and doing this and poisoning our minds with all the crap that was going to happen post-election was because Donald Trump wanted to actually be able to say, I didn't lie. For once, I'm not lying. My mouth
Right.
is moving and I'm doing what I said I was going to do.
Yeah. Yeah. His administration is doing things. I will say that I think most of the time he's sitting at the Resolute desk with one of those IHOP placemats that they give to kids with the little 4-pack of crayons. And he's coloring in the dinosaur. And then the ideologues that are running the show, the Stephen Millers of the world, are the ones actually putting pieces of paper in front of him to sign. I don't think that he has the sort of policy heft to make the kinds of moves that they are doing, especially with regard to the administrative state. So he has outsourced thinking to other people. About as much as he can get involved in is pissing matches with other countries over things like buying them or sending people back in deplorable conditions on planes, military planes at great cost. So yeah, I don't think that a lot of these are his personal ideas, but he definitely ran on a lot of this stuff happening. So
I have to tell you, Richie, because you and I kind of recommended it, and I thought, well, I can't just recommend it. I have to actually live by our words, not be a hypocrite, and be one of those do as I say, not as I do people. So I've been on a substantial news diet. And even though we're here and we're doing this, I've really done my best to limit my intake of news to about 2 hours a week.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
But it's not gonna work. I know that. And actually, when I really realized that was this morning when I received a text message from a friend of mine in the state of Hawaii. And he's like, "Are you guys really thinking about seceding?" And of course, there's been many occasions over the last several months where I've suggested that California should do exactly that, if for no other reason but then the fact that we are the 4th largest economy in the world as a state. That's a pretty significant thing. And when you think about, and I did the research and we talked a little bit about it on a past episode about just how much that would impact the economy of the United States if California were to be removed from that, really, really, really substantially if you removed California, New York, and Washington state. And it's substantial. Apparently, it's underway because this person's local Fox station, not the Fox network, but the local Fox affiliate over in Hawaii, they had a story that he forwarded me from there about what's going on here. And apparently, they're in the process of getting some 500 and some odd thousand signatures right now, which they have to do by May in order to put this before voters to force at least the legislature to begin putting together a blue ribbon commission here in the state to research what, if, and how this could happen. And what really amused me in reading the story more was the responses from people living in Hawaii who were responding to the local stations posting this story, talking about how screwed up California is and how we'd only be really screwing ourselves over. And I got to thinking about it and back to the research I was doing a few weeks ago to see exactly what the economics of it would be. And I was like, I don't think people realize outside of California, I don't think a lot of people realize that the Republican Party here is almost at the third party status. And that I don't think they realize that even though there are some Republicans who've been elected, from the hinterlands to the legislative offices, we have absolutely zero statewide offices that are occupied by anybody other than Democrats. And we also have very, very strong regulations here that the rest of the nation does not have when it comes to non-discrimination. So, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem like a bad idea to me. I kind of wonder how things would happen militarily because of those assets being here in California and the fact that the entire Pacific Fleet is based in San Diego. I think, honestly, if we went, Hawaii would probably go too and come along with us,
Yeah, I mean, at this point, anything's on the table. I mean, it's everything, things that you thought a month ago that you maybe thought would not be on the bingo card are on the bingo card. I mean, again, threatening allies with buying them, like Greenland, or with annexing them, like Canada, or with perhaps military action to take over a canal that is not ours to take over, like Panama, saber rattling with Colombia over sending back undocumented immigrants. The threats to literal allies go on and on. The idea of some states seceding from the increasingly sort of frayed United States would not surprise me going forward, especially when the things that actually hold us together start to fall away. And that kind of gets to some of the things we'll talk about today in terms of the dismantling of the administrative state and the protections that it gives to many Americans for many things.
I don't know. In the limited amount of news coverage I've actually seen in the last few days, it looks like he was actually doing a pretty good job of behaving himself in the company of Gavin Newsom.
Are you talking about on the tarmac?
Well, no, I'm talking about not just at the tarmac, but places where they were, viewing the damage done in the Southern California fires and so on. And he did not seem as combative when he had to face Gavin face to face, because Gavin he's not a guy that's going to be an easy pushover for Donald.
No. That's true. Because, at the end of the day, for the current president, dominance is everything. And Gavin Newsom is and he's also all about appearances. Literally, he says things like, so-and-so was great for my cabinet because he looked like he came out of central casting. Yeah. That's how he thinks about things. And so Gavin Newsom is a young, attractive, tall man with a firm handshake. That's the kind of person that could physically intimidate Donald Trump. Because for him,
he's definitely Donald's alpha.
Yeah. But, okay. With all of that, we will get to the news. Yeah. So the first story we have is something that, again, is just kind of shocking, but not surprising, because it is heartless and needless, which seem to be the hallmarks of this new administration. And so
maybe I fit in perfectly there.
What?
Maybe I fit in perfectly there.
Maybe so. But so in a swift move with significant global repercussions, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, I hate that phrase, recently directed foreign aid to be frozen. And what that has done has abruptly suspended funding to the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, known as PEPFAR, which was started under the famously liberal George W. Bush. This vital initiative, which has saved over 25 million lives in Africa since 2003, when it was started by President George W. Bush, faces dire consequences. Reports indicate that this freeze could cut off access to antiviral medications possibly as early as Monday for millions of people, with concerns about the sufficiency of the existing medication stockpiles. So this decision aligns with Trump's executive order pausing all foreign aid for 90 days to evaluate its alignment with U.S. foreign policies, whatever that means. On Saturday, Trump defended the cut, emphasizing the need for international burden sharing. Something he likes to always sort of mention is that others should be paying their fair share, whatever that again means. However, lawmakers like Representative Gregory Meeks and Representative Lois Frankel have publicly criticized the decision, expressing deep concerns over its potential to undermine global stability and American leadership. Their letter to Secretary Rubio warns that halting PEPFAR disrupts critical treatment for over 20 million individuals in 55 countries, threatening lives amid increasing political scrutiny.
Unbelievable.
It is of a piece with this new administration that it is from the top down. It is from Trump on down, but it is also something that is sort of the people who he surrounded himself by are people without empathy, people without humanity, and without care for others in any regard.
I think it's also an issue of where they look at where can we not really just strike the most fear, but where can we really screw with the people who are highly likely to be our worst critics and help remove them from the earth.
Right. And there's also just because we have to go back, our memories these days with TikTok and everything, our memories are like, our attention span is nothing. But we have to go back to remember in the first administration, the references to, quote, shithole countries. This is an administration run by someone who just thinks of the continent of Africa as being something that they just literally don't care about. The people there, the economy there, none of it matters to them.
I'm glad you brought the reference up to that particular event that happened because, as I recall, that happened like at lightning speed after they took office the first time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it was meant to be one of those shock and awe moments.
Yes. Yeah. For sure. And this is one of these moves that they're making that I think that they're trying to, like you say, come out of the gate with a bunch of strong actions and to really show, really kind of show their dominance, show their force. And if people die as a result, and people will die because of this decision, they don't care.
So what if it's not him or them?
Yeah,
They don't
exactly.
care.
Yeah. And particularly, they really don't care because as far as they're concerned, this affects Black people. And as we've seen from many other decisions they are making right now, that is a particular thing that they don't care about at all. And they, in fact, are antagonistic towards. So it's a bad decision. I mean, it's a bad policy change. It's going to make millions of people's lives worse. But that's part and parcel for what we are getting based on, again, some people who thought the eggs were too expensive.
Yeah. And that he could do a thing about it. Actually, in fact, what's happened, because when he comes into office, things get sick. People get sick, birds get sick, you know, and it screws with everybody and everything that impacts people's pocketbook too.
Exactly. But of course, it's Biden's fault when the eggs aren't cheap enough when he's in office. When Trump's in office and the price of eggs skyrockets because of the avian flu and because he actually can't, because controlling eggs is not something presidents are in the business of doing, suddenly it's not his fault.
Well, let's just face it. I mean, whether you're talking about COVID or you're talking about avian flu, Trump is just a disease. He is the disease on humanity.
I would say that he's horrible. I think Trumpism is absolutely and seems to be a communicable disease because people it seems to be spreading, and I don't know how, because you have to truly be touched in the head to make any of it fit together.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I don't know that he's made America great again, but he is definitely making more Americans felons again. So the Justice Department, by the way, has dropped charges against a Houston surgeon, Ethan Haim, who recently faced 4 felony counts for allegedly sharing transgender patients' medical information with right-wing activist Christopher Rufo. The case involved internal documents from Texas Children's Hospital back in 2023, which Haim managed to access, even though he did not work there at the time. The records purportedly showed minors who received gender-affirming care, a practice that is supported by major U.S. medical associations. Previously, prosecutors had argued that Haim acted with the intent to cause malicious harm, but he maintained his actions were in support of whistleblowers everywhere. I wonder if that includes the ones who tattletale on Donald Trump. Well, Haim's decision to publicize these private medical records was considered a violation of the Health Insurance Portability Accountability Act, or HIPAA as it's known. Despite legal concerns, some of the people on the right defended him and emphasized that his opposition to gender-affirming care. Assistant clinical professor Carmel Shachar noted that leaked documents were not properly de-identified, potentially exposing patients to risks. The dismissal by U.S. Attorney Jennifer B. Lowry came without explanation in her signed motion. I can tell you what it was. Personally, I don't have to be a mind reader. It was, the new boss is without any care or consideration to other people's privacy, and he doesn't like trans people, and neither do the people in his administration. So if there's a way for us to F him, let's F him.
Exactly. And this is something, that we are going to see a lot of because, in terms of what a president can and can't do is, of course, Trump thinks he can do everything. We do have checks and balances, although we have a supine Republican legislature that's going to just rubber stamp anything that he says. But we technically, there are rules about what can and can't be done by executive action. One of the things that they can do on the executive side, though, is choose what to enforce and what not to enforce. So here, there was, obviously a clear violation of federal law specifically federal law around privacy of medical records for transgender children. And the previous administration rightly thought that that's something that we should not let happen, that we should prosecute that. But the incoming administration does not, as you said, does not care about trans children, does not think they should exist, and dropped it.
They don't. They're not real. There's only two genders.
I'm surprised they can even count that high. But but this is a thing they can do. Another example is that the administration has told the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice to not make any new filings, open any new cases with regards to civil rights enforcement. That means things such as race discrimination, sex discrimination, LGBTQ discrimination. So basically the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ, which is the primary way that this stuff is enforced, has been told to sit on their hands indefinitely. So this is what we'll see a lot of is the administration using their right to do nothing to harm people.
I smell the doggy position getting used here. I refuse to call it by the name that guy who makes battery run cars likes to use, the thing that is kind of named similarly to his cryptocurrency. I think it should be considered dog-E. And by that, people getting effed in the doggy position. I think that they're just going to use that as a way to clear that division at the DOJ and release all those people from being employed by the federal government.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what's happening in agencies.
Once again, those people are getting a doggy position.
Right. This is happening in many, many agencies right now, is that they are stopping work from happening, saying they're directing agencies to not do things. Then they will say, well, why do we have these employees here? Because they're not doing anything. And they will have huge reductions in force, or they'll make people so miserable in their jobs that they will choose to leave and they will not fill those jobs again. I mean, it's a very brute force way to shrink the administrative state and really curb things like environmental protection, civil rights enforcement, anything that sort of smacks of, blue, they're just going to completely eviscerate.
We have a mutual friend who works for the United States Army Corps of Engineers, and he started his week this week finding out that he could no longer presumably work remote. He mostly works remote and for him, that is going to mean a substantial hit, because that means he's going to end up having to commute hours every day to go to an office where he doesn't need to be to do his job.
That's right. That was a mandate that came down from the administration that as of February 1, all employees federal employees have to report in person, no remote work. And again, the reason for that is not for efficiency or because it makes sense, but because they want people to be miserable, people who have built their lives around remote work, and quit. And they won't replace those people. That's exactly what they're gonna do every possible way they can. And yeah, it's going to, I was talking with a friend and I said, all of these moves that they're making are going to spike unemployment. How are they going to sell that to the American people? And they made the good point. Who at the Department of Labor is left to crunch those numbers? No one. There's not going to be anyone left to actually put out a report that unemployment went up. They won't report it out. They'll just do a press release from the White House that says everyone in the country is employed now.
But you know who will? Well, first of all, Washington, D.C., the city, is really a very blue place. Mm-hmm. And many states where a lot of those jobs could really deeply be affected will be able to release reports on what they're doing in terms of their own unemployment rates. Mm-hmm. In the states and what they have to pay in unemployment benefits and so on. So I have a feeling that we are going to see a lot of bad news in the future coming out of state employment security departments.
Yeah.
And he can't control that.
He can't control that. Whether that will be picked up by the sort of asleep at the wheel mainstream media is yet to be seen. That might be considered to be too small potato, because again, one of the things that the current president is excellent at doing is shaking a shiny thing in front of everyone and
Like a
taking
Bible or some tennis shoes.
yeah, and distracting and making it so there isn't any room left for actual reportage, which most of these agencies have, these news outlets have cut their reporting so drastically already that they don't have the bodies around to actually do that work.
We have so many stories to get through. Unfortunately, we have to move right along. And I do want to just say before we get into our next story that this one in particular turns my skin on fire. And I mean, they all do, really. But this next one is, to me, the fact that it is coming at the behest of a president who, for once, he really is setting history, because he is the first president of the United States to be elected by all these stupid people in the United States who've now elected its first adjudicated rapist.
Right. And yeah. And so, usually when you do, when you are adjudicated to, and, to have done serious crimes and even, convicted of some serious crimes, different crimes for that particular person, usually jail is sort of part of the equation. Mm-hmm. But here, for trans women who are in federal prisons, jail is about to get a lot worse, a lot more dangerous, and perhaps deadly, because in a significant policy shift, President Trump has ordered federal prisons to house transgender women in men's facilities and to stop their gender-affirming health care. This follows an executive order from his first day in office, limiting gender recognition to, quote, immutable male and female categories. The policy also impacts immigration detainees and omits directives for trans men, strangely. Health care for transgender women in prisons will cease immediately, with federal funds barred from supporting gender-conforming treatments or procedures.
It's part of what we call the federal grab 'em by the pussy act.
Yeah, it's really telling that this is like their priority one, like out of the gate, like day one, like story one was two sexes. That was their, not price of eggs, that was like one of their signal things was to say, we are going to literally focus on and erase trans people. That's mission one.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing that happening in every possible way that they can. So transgender rights advocates warn that this move endangers lives, predicting increases in assaults and harassment. Shannon Minter from the National Center for Lesbian Rights highlights the heightened vulnerability of transgender inmates, and data shows that they are 10 times more likely to face sexual violence.
I have to tell you, Shannon is a hero. She is a national hero, and she is an incredible person. I've known her and have talked with her in the past about her many accomplishments as an attorney for the National Center for Lesbian Rights, and we're going to get her on this show. And we have so much stuff to talk about with her for sure. But this is just one more of those issues. She played a very significant role in the fight for the right to marry in the state of California.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and I look forward to having Shannon on the show because, like you said, we're going to have a ton to talk about, but, including this issue. So here, there will be legal challenges to this decision, which currently, affects about 1,500 transgender women inmates in federal prisons.
Think about it, by the way, that before we even had to deal with this aspect of this issue, that transgender inmates, previous data had shown, like you're talking about here, 10 times more likely to face sexual violence while incarcerated.
Mm-hmm.
So I can only imagine with the blessing of Orange Folius, what it's going to go to.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and again, this is an administration with no compassion or empathy or care for humans. So to score a point to own the libs, they are going to cause there to be sexual violence and perhaps worse on their watch in their prisons.
Yeah, and here we are relying on a very screwed up Supreme Court, which already skews far to the right, to ultimately make decisions, and in this case, one that a lot of people are arguing would potentially violate the Eighth Amendment, which, the whole idea of protecting people against cruel and unusual punishment by the state, But we've already seen how the Supreme Court, in its current makeup, has dealt with that by allowing a fraudster, a felon, a rapist to be elected to the office of President of the United States and to have basically immunity from any accountability for anything wrong.
Yep.
It's disgusting. Well, the United States Department of Education has announced its decision to halt federal efforts addressing the surge in book bans by right-wing groups and local school districts in a release titled, "The U.S. Department of Education Ends Biden Book Ban Hoax." Hoax? You mean, Richie, you and I have wasted so much time between when we were doing the happy hour and now doing Richie and John talking about this issue about books being banned, and it turns out that it was nothing but a hoax? Oh, bullshit. Officials have cited the need to restore parents' rights in managing their children's education. So if I'm a parent and I say, look, I don't care what you're going to get out of those books or whatever happened on this planet, but I know for a fact that you need to be teaching kids to watch out for spaceships and funny little things that come out of them and impregnate children with alien technology. That's what needs to be professed. I mean, come on. Parents are not teachers.
Okay, there's so much here because, first of all, parents are not teachers. That is correct. But this parental choice canard is always what they rely on. And what they're really saying is we want to make ideological decisions. And because here's an exact parallel, which is if it comes to allowing books to be literally taken out of libraries, you can say one parent's choice, one parent's decision to take a book can take this book entirely out of the circulation of an entire school district. At the same time, parents' choices to work with their doctors to provide gender affirming care to their children, no. Parents' choice there, no. We won't let the parents make the choice or the child make the choice. We will make the choice. So it is complete hypocrisy, and it is a total red herring, this parental choice thing. So yeah, that's a lie. I mean, but it's just, again, another situation where the administration can do a lot of things by doing nothing at all.
Okay, fine. You're not going to let the kids go to the library, or at least not without the books being taken out of there? I say that teachers just start bringing Gooners into their classrooms.
Maybe that's the answer. But, PEN America has reported 16,000 school book bans since 2021. The book ban hoax is actually a book ban reality. And PEN America has expressed alarm at the department's move. Critics argue that many bans focus on works by and about marginalized communities. Imagine that.
We should get somebody from PEN America to come on our show.
We should, it would be good to hear from them because they are on the front lines of a lot of the book ban pushback.
Yeah. I met with some people in Las Vegas at the Creating Change conference this past week with one of the publishing companies that publishes an awful lot of LGBTQIA books on a wide variety of topics. So some of the stuff is nonfiction, some of it is fiction, some of it is resource type books, and definitely a lot of history perspective things. And I think it would be interesting also to get them and maybe representatives of other presses that have long had a relationship with publishing LGBTQIA titles, like maybe St. Martin's Press. And the guy who used to be the head of publicity there is still in New York doing a different function now. But I think he'd be really good to bring on and to hear from the standpoint of a publisher with all of the First Amendment facets of this as well, to hear what they are doing as a publisher to be able to continue in their work. Mm-hmm. Because this is not only an infringement on other people's rights, it's an infringement on their ability to exist as a legitimate publishing company.
Yeah. And, again, this kind of goes to the standing hypocrisy of, these sort of conservatives and the MAGA movement is, in the classical sense, the Republican Party was pro-business, and let businesses do what they want to do, except if it means that the business wants to do initiatives that support DEI, or publish books that talk about the existence of gay people or about Black history or whatever. In that case, the private market, we're going to tell them what to do anyway. And we're going to make sure that we are going to investigate and punish private companies for taking actions that support diversity, equity, and inclusion. So again, it is bullshit that they are really this kind of shining light for the private sector, because they are
By
not.
the way, you just said the magic 3 letters there, DEI. We are not doing the story this week, and I'm working on something that we might do a little more in depth down the road here soon. But I just wanted to toss in the factoid that Costco and their shareholders did decline the effort to change their policies on DEI. So the shareholders did take positive action this week and backed up the board of directors, who asked them to not mess with their success.
Yep. Speaking of messing with things, the Trump administration has removed a page from the Social Security Administration's website, which detailed how individuals could change their gender marker on Social Security records. Previously, the page stated that no medical or legal evidence was needed for such updates, but attempts to access the page now lead to an error message blocking user access to this information. Ari Drennan, LGBTQ program director at Media Matters, advised that individuals wishing to change their markers should seek Form SS5 at their local SSA office. But this isn't the only example of the new administration scrubbing federal websites from any mention of LGBTQ issues. Since Trump's second inauguration, numerous federal web pages have been purged of LGBTQ plus content, including sites from the White House and multiple federal departments. This impacts resources concerning LGBTQ rights and HIV information. I think I read somewhere that they are spiking existing pages on public health websites that published, articles about LGBTQ issues. They're just removing them, even though that is not, I believe, under federal statute, those are supposed to be public forever, under like Public Records Acts and FOIA and a number of other things, but they're just going ahead and deleting them.
Oh, who's going to pay attention to that when you can just throw things in the fireplace at the White House?
Or in the toilet, clog the toilet with, So Trump's administration has consistently worked towards limiting the visibility of LGBTQ issues. Again, as we talked about, reflected in the executive order that only 2 sexes exist. And so we're seeing this again. Administrations can do things and they can also choose to not do things. Here, they're choosing throughout the federal administrative space, sort of that the executive department has purview over, to just not tell people about LGBTQ stuff, HIV stuff. I have not confirmed it, but I've seen in several places this also includes taking the Constitution off the White House webpage.
Yeah, it did. And yes, there have been multiple places where I've actually gone and followed up when I've seen various stories in the past week that have talked about this, going and seeing, sure enough, there's an error 404. It's unreal.
So it's, again, this is the kind of stuff that they're coming in strong. They are showing that they are going to use every means possible to make as many people miserable as possible, as quickly as possible. So we're going to have to pay a lot of attention, because they're not showing any signs of slowing down. Although I did see that the current president did take the day when he probably could have been dealing with things like the rising avian flu epidemic. He instead went golfing at Doral, his own property, where the Secret Service is paying millions of dollars to protect him on his own property. So there's that. But we have our final story is I guess a little bit of a fun one,
It is, but it's not if you're one of our friends who considers yourself to be a avid baiter.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us about this one? Because when I first saw it, I was confused because I just saw the headline and I was like, what is this? What is happening here?
Yeah, well, I think that it may have a satirical facet to it, but, stranger things have happened and could happen in the future. So it turns out that in Mississippi, State Senator Bradford Blackmun has humorously introduced a bill that would criminalize masturbation, imposing fines from $1,000 to $10,000 unless the action aims to fertilize an egg. Yeah, we're not talking about the same kind of eggs here. While raising eyebrows, the proposed legislation is actually a satirical response to echo Republican efforts on controlling women's reproductive rights. Senator Blackmun, a Democrat, shared that the measure aims to spotlight the imbalance in reproductive debates, and that often falls solely on women. The announcement follows the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, of course, prompting states like Mississippi to enact strict abortion laws. Blackmun's proposal highlights the often overlooked role of men in reproduction, pondering why they aren't subject to similar restrictions. The senator's symbolic gesture will likely not advance in Mississippi's largely Republican political landscape, which typically opposes granting women autonomy over their own bodies. Nonetheless, Senator Blackmun's initiative serves as a potential commentary on current reproductive politics. So I have to tell you, in the original story I read about this, it talked substantially about restricting the flow of jizz. And that's how they put it in the story.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, guys. You know, what's good for the goose is good for the goosette.
I mean, the thing about this story is, you know, I get it. I see the point. I see the satirical, you know, that it's trying to make a point about the hypocrisy of governing women's bodies versus governing men's bodies. And that is a true thing. At the same time, at this particular moment, don't give them any ideas, because I feel like actually there are folks in the Project 2025 world that would be like, you know what? Criminalizing masturbation sounds like a great idea. It would give us more control over more people's personal lives and get into their bedrooms. Like, I almost
that. I mean, think about all the productivity that probably this would affect, because instead of guys, you know, doing a little something while they're on the job, when they get bored or they need a little change of pace or something like that, this will make them have to stay focused on doing whatever the man wants them to do.
Right. And I think,
I personally, as an employer, hate the idea of having to pay somebody to jerk off on my time.
Yeah.
Unless it's all over me.
There's that. Yeah. There is that. Yeah, it's true. But, you know, it just, so we'll see. You know, I thought that was a funny little story, but don't give them ideas, because we have no idea what's happening next. But in any case, that was sort of a little quick roundup. There's so many stories that we could have brought you, but, you know, we can't make the show 10 hours long because there really is that much. There's so much happening, but we will do our best going forward to try to pick the stories that we think really kind of encapsulate the moment specifically. And of course, always focused on the LGBTQ plus community. And, you know,
I'd like to add one more thing before we go. And that is that we did have an opportunity to speak with a lot of interesting and inspiring people this past week at Creating Change. And some of those you're going to hear on the Saturday editions of the show in the weeks to come. Some really cool people. We didn't get to do interviews with everybody we wanted to do them with, but we had a lot of interest in people who wanted to join us here on the program. And we really did limit how many people we did those interviews with there, because the interviews there were done only in audio. So in the interest of our commitment to having our newer video programming as well, we're going to be inviting a lot of these people that we met to come on the show and do the show with us here in the video environment as well, so that you don't lose out on the experience of having the opportunity to see them and see things that they're up to. So just a lot of really fabulous connections that were made over the last week, and that you'll have become the beneficiary of here on this program in the weeks and months to come. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, and I'm really excited for those interviews and for the interviews to come that will have been generated out of this wonderful event that you went to. But I will say, every time we do this show, we end the episode with how to get in touch with us. And I'm going to do this again, but I really want to ask people in a very direct way, because there are so many news stories coming out that it's impossible to read them all as one person. We are going to miss things. And so now more than ever, we really want you to reach out to us with stories about the LGBTQ plus population that you've come across, because we might miss them. And it's really helpful to us for you to let us know about things that you see and come across. So the best place to do that is richieandjohn.com, our website. There is a form there where you can connect with us. We have an email address, which is info@richieandjohn.com. We have a phone number that is 878-768-8825. However you want to get in touch with us, please keep us posted about things you're hearing, things you're seeing, stories that you think affect our community. And that's going to allow us to make this show the best it can be, because we're going to need to all work together in the near term and probably for the next 4 years to pay attention to stuff.
Yeah, and whether you live in a giant jungle of a city, a cement jungle, or you live out in the hinterlands, if you see things happening, or people who have been hurt, screwed over, impacted by discrimination or by losing, opportunity simply because there is such a perception, at least, that we live in a ridiculous time in our history with regards to people basically being empowered to be awful to other people. Please let us know about that and how we can get a hold of those people too if they want to share their stories, because we'd like to be able to offer you real life experiences of people who listen to this program, or also the people who are in their close circle of friends who may otherwise not get the attention to a story that deserves to have some national focus on it. So again, the phone numbers and the email addresses and all of that stuff, as well as our feedback form, are all available at Richie and John, RICHIEANDJOHN.com, on our website, on the homepage. Very easy to find that information and get to us. So please do.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will talk to you again on Saturday.
Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you for joining us on Richie and John. This podcast is a production of the Mutual Broadcasting System and is available at richieandjohn.com, as well as most major podcast portals, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify.